So I'm not going to call this an Ixalan draft guide necessarily, right? I'm about to go into a draft here. Look forward to that video too if you're not watching live on Twitch. Hey YouTube, what's going on? We just kind of launched into it. Sorry, Twitch chat, but yeah, in case you're wondering, I don't know that I'll call this like a draft guide. These are just kind of the top 3 commons and uncommons in each color that I'm kind of looking for in limited, whether that's sealed or draft or whatever. So a couple of quick disclaimers here, really just one big one. I didn't pick any removal for this list at all. If you see removal, it's good, take it. That's basically it. Otherwise, this entire list would be removal and that would be super boring. So most of the removal in the set is good, literally almost all of it. All of it? Yeah, literally all of the removal in the set is playable. So just pick that up when you see it. You know that's important, all right? This is big boy limited lessons from a guy that should play more limited, honestly. Used to be more of a limited guy. We'll see if I still got it tonight. But again, these are the cards that I am looking for in limited, basically. Commons and uncommons in each color. Let's go. So this first, hey, it's crowded over there. That's kind of neat. Anyway, this first card is Zoltek Cloud Guard, a common in white. And not a great looking card, right? That's because turns out a lot of the drafty little commons in the set aren't amazing, but this one is okay. It's 4 mana for a 3/2 flyer, so it's a snapping drake right out of the gate. And then you get a 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature token. Cool thing is there's a lot of artifact synergies in the set. There's a lot of stuff that wants you to tap artifacts and stuff you control. So the gnome helps you with that, or it can just attack or block. You basically get 4 power, 3 of it in the air. This is not a bad common, is all I'm saying. Oteklan Landmark, this is the thing that just costs a single mana, ETB, Scry 2. You can craft it for cheap, just 3 mana, and then it becomes Oteklan Levitator, a 1/4 flying artifact creature. When it attacks another thing without flying, gains flying till end of turn. So we've seen this limited creature a bunch of times, and it's usually pretty good. It's even better in a set with a bunch of huge dinosaurs. I give my 6 power guy flying, why not, But also this, the 1 mana, when you first cast the card, that version of it is pretty good, man. Scry 2 is not bad. It's an artifact. There's a lot of stuff you can do with that, from sacrificing it to tapping it to just having it on the battlefield when you cast Thousand Moon Smithy. It goes towards the count. So there's a bunch of cool stuff about this card. I think it's a really strong common. Aside from that, uncommons in white. Helping Hand. There's a lot of really strong, especially legendary 2 and 3 mana creatures in this set. So an Unearth in white is pretty good, and I shouldn't have to tell you that. It's just a really strong uncommon. It's basically card selection. It's like drawing a card from it's not even drawing a card from your graveyard. It's mana value in a lot of ways, and there's just so many low-cost creatures in the set that this can get back and are really important to your game plan, whether it's Bard or something else, right? Guardian of the Great Door, another cool little uncommon in white here, man. This is one of the things that wants you to tap stuff, but at the sort of floor of this, it's a 6 mana 4/4 flyer. So it's an air elemental. That wins games of limited. You know what I mean? Because you can tap lands for it too. But if you just have a couple of artifacts kind of laying around, then suddenly this becomes a really, really cheap, big dude in the air. They just win a game of limited, so he's cool. Malamet Warscribe, another amazing uncommon that I wanted to point out. This is probably going to be the ceiling of a bunch of aggro decks in limited, so just kind of keep your eye out for this. There's not a lot of overrun effects in this format. There is one 2 mana instant speed thing that's modal. It gives one of your creatures hexproof, or gives all of your creatures hexproof on one mode. So it's kind of a counter spell. That's a good card. And on the other mode, it's all your guys get +1/+1. That's a good uncommon too, but Warscribe gives it to you on a body. It's a bigger power boost, and so it can just alpha for you when it comes down. Pretty good card here. In blue, River Herald Scout's a common to look out for. Just, a 2 mana cheap guy that explores. So not only does it fulfill explore conditions in your explore decks you might be drafting up, but it can also put a card in the graveyard for descend or whatever. So that's kind of good. Just basically a 2 mana guy that might draw you a card. That's always good as well. Sage of Days. I like this dude. Some people are putting the 5 mana thing that draws you a card when it comes into play and has flying if you have descend 4. I think some people are putting that as their pick in this slot for one of their favorite blue commons. I'm going Sage of Days instead. It's not quite card advantage, but it's going to trade sometimes up, but it's going to trade in combat fairly easily, and it's going to give you some decent selection and maybe some cards in your graveyard for descend or whatever too, so that's good. Waterwind Scout, probably the best blue common in the set for draft or limited in general. It's a Windrake that puts a map token into play. That's just really good. That is fantastic. Shouldn't have to tell you. Confounding Riddle, really strong blue uncommon here. I'm actually not sure how incredible this is going to be in draft specifically, but it could be really good in any sort of control-y build or thing that wants to get to the late game, and the Descend builds want to get to the late game. This also helps your Descend count out while getting, it's really good selection, helps you get to your bombs. Sometimes it's a counterspell, just all-around good card. Lodestone Needle is neat. This is kind of removal in a way, just for a few turns, gives you some good tempo, but has flash as well, so you can cast it before your opponent attacks, and that kind of takes the creature out for functionally 3 turns worth of attacking, and that's kind of a big deal in these decks that, again, want to get a little bit towards the late game. Crafted is really cheap. It's only 3 mana, and it becomes this thing that lets you explore every single turn for pretty low mana, just a single mana, so that can help you draw extra cards or, like, you know, win the sort of the creature race, I guess, you know, whoever's got the biggest guys wins. So that's not a bad little activated ability to have every turn. Staunch Crewmate is, I think, our last blue uncommon. Really good dude, man. Just, you don't even have to have a bunch of pirates in the deck. If I'm not mistaken, there's like 70 artifacts in this set. There's way more than you might think. It's a pretty artifact heavy set. So this dude can find a card like really easily, even if you just have a few artifacts and like 1 or 2 other pirates in your deck. And he doesn't have embarrassing stats. Just as good as he is in constructed, he's pretty good in limited. In black, Screaming Phantom, the first comment I want to go over. Again, a Windrake, you know, a 3 mana 2/2 flyer in case that wasn't clear before. But this one also helps, you know, with Descend. Not only Descend, but whether or not you've descended that turn. You know, you can descend while still getting a body in play. So this dude is more solid than he looks. And as a common, he might make up like sort of bread and butter for the middle of the curve for some decks. Vito's Inquisitor. Love this guy. He's a common, man. He's just a hill giant in terms of stats. 4 mana, 3/3. But he's got a relevant creature type and vampire. And even though it does cost black to do this, you know, it costs mana every time you do it. He doesn't tap. You can do it multiple times a turn. It gains menace till end of turn and a counter. So Bart is a rare. This dude is a common. It might form the backbone of more of these like sacrifice decks. But even if it's not a sacrifice deck, you're just playing like Tinker's Tote and a couple of other, you know, artifacts or something. This dude gets to like a 6/6 pretty easily. Your opponent can't ignore it. Skullcap Snail, a black common. We're looking at black commons again now for some reason. This is, I just really like this guy too, man. 2 mana for a 1/1 Snail, and when he ETBs, opponent exiles a card from their hand. Sweet little common. Sweet little common. It's a common for a burglar rat. That's a strict upgrade on that card. Deep Cavern Bat is a kind of a, I guess they're together because these are functionally similar cards. It's Kitesail Freebooter that also takes a card out of the opponent's hand. They get it back if they get rid of the bat, but they have to like spin removal to do that. And maybe sometimes you don't mind if they have their card back so long as you block their huge dude in the air. So like it's good for that too. Soul Coil Viper, another black uncommon here, and I think it's the end of the black uncommons. This is just a doomed necromancer, if I'm reading it correctly, and that is like ultra powerful. Like in Commander, that's, you know, maybe a 5, you know, if it's played some of the time, but in Limited, this is still a decent card. As far as reanimation spells go, it's actually pretty sick. Stinging Cave Crawler, this is our final black card. This is 3 mana for a 1/3 Death Touch, and when it attacks, if they're, you know, if you have Descend 4, you draw a card and lose a life. I read this card because I don't know how many people have actually really paid that much attention to this card, but it's just a Scorpion, you know? It's a 3 mana 1/3 Death Touch. We've seen that before, and I don't mind those stats. Brick Wall is some aggro. They just will not swing into it, but aside from that, this doesn't even have to deal combat damage. Just attack, you draw a card. That's very good at uncommon. So let's move on to red here and look at Hotfoot Gnome, which is for some reason a common. I was under the impression this was a common like the whole time until gathering cards for this. It turns out this card is somehow a common. It's sort of a reckless Stormseeker, especially when you look at like the power level of Limited. I'm even more comfortable calling it sort of a reckless Stormseeker, you know. It's a good little card, man. 3 mana 3/1 haste. It might not get to attack all the time when it hastes him, but it's going to give all your huge dinosaurs haste and stuff. Yes, play that card. Seismic Monstrosaur. This is the only thing with like a land cycling ability on this list, but I think basically everything with the land cycling ability is sort of okay, especially depending on the makeup of your deck. You're playing some ramp cards, these get a little bit better and stuff, especially if you're playing ramp because you might want to hit your drops, right? Because they help you do that and they're like huge ramp payoffs. This guy, though, I like a little bit more than a lot of the other ones. He's got Trample, and that's a really, really important ability, even in Constructed, but in Sealed especially, it's great. But in Draft, this is still a really important ability for making sure they can't chump you, because chump blocking is one of the most common interactions in Limited. So really important that any card has Trample. But aside from that, sack a land, draw a card ain't bad. That's not a terrible activated ability. Also helps you hit your Descend and stuff like that if you want to, so not bad. Plundering Pirate, the last common I wanted to look at in red. This is just a 3-mana 3/2 and an ETB's treasure token, so kind of a jewel thief that took a toughness off, but that's a really playable card. You know, we're ramping in this set. There's a bunch of like pirates that want to have artifacts into play, and this helps sort of satisfy those conditions. Any of your artifact decks, right, that want to have artifacts in play, and we'll look at a card that sort of fits those conditions in a second. This is really good with, so there's a lot of stuff this does in this format. Aside from that, dowsing device, it wants you to have artifacts in play, doesn't it? I've already talked about this card a bunch, like in the Sleepers video. Not going to linger on it too long here, but again, 70 plus, I think it's 71 really, artifacts in this set. So actually not too hard, and there's a bunch of stuff like Tinker's Tote that basically flips this over immediately, and both cards are uncommon, so... I'm pretty sure you want to play this card, is all I'm saying. If you're, again, the makeup of your deck is correct. So it flips over into Geode Grotto, by the way. If you want to see that card, there it is. It's a you pay 3 mana, you tap it, a creature gets haste and +X/+O. X is the artifacts you control, activate as a sorcery. Just a mind-blowing ability that's on a land. Let's go. Geological Appraiser, a good uncommon in red. It's a Bloodbraid Elf. Basically just is a Bloodbraid Elf. I don't really know how much more I have to say. This is a hill giant that also does something else. We don't know what else, but something. I assume when you cast it, it's going to cast something else. Maybe put another body on the table or play a removal spell. It's all good, you know. Sizeclaw Raptor. I think the last red uncommon, if I'm not mistaken. This is just a 3-mana 4/3, which is stout enough already, but it also makes your opponent just get flamed by Boros Charm, you know, every time they try to do anything on your turn. That seems good. So like if you play this and they try to instant speed removal anything on your side of the table, that's a char to the dome. So like, yeah, I think it's pretty good. Aside from that, Kaslim's Stone Tree, the first green common I want to look at. This is just like basically ramp. You'll probably find a land in the top 6. If you don't, I'm sorry, I feel really bad for you, but you ought to find a land in the top 6 of your 40 card deck especially. But later in the game for 6 mana, this just becomes a 5/5. So just, you know, 3-mana ramp spell. 3-mana ramp spell. Those are decent in your ramp deck, in your dinosaurs deck, whatever you're doing. Your caves deck even, you know. Because this can put a cave into play the way it's worded. And then later in the game, 5/5. Awesome. It's actually okay, right? Poison Dart Frog you need to look out for. This goes in your ramp deck, fixes your colors, you know, but later in the game it can just kill a giant flyer. It's really, really good, man. That's a common. That card's a common. River Herald Guide. It was really close between this and like the spider that's in this set. I know that card looks unassuming, but there's a 4-mana 3/4 strict upgrade on Giant Spider, a 4-mana 3/4 reach that ETBs and you may mill 2 cards. So it's really good with Descend and stuff like that. I think that card's better than it looks. But River Herald Guide is probably slightly better than that card. This is a 3-mana, 3/1 Vigilance, and when it ETBs, it explores. So you might get a 4/2 Vigilance that trades up pretty easily. And also just swings for a chunk, you know, or you might just get like a 3-mana 3-power guy that has Vigilance and draws a card and still trades fairly easily in combat. So I think this guy's just fantastic. Bread and butter sort of common for green decks. And that's true whether you're in the Explore deck or you're in the Descend deck, you know, like black-green Explore, black-green Descend rather. Or if you're just like in some sort of weirdo mid-range deck, like you still want this guy. He's pretty good. Aside from that, Quaddy Scavenger. This is the first green uncommon I want to look at. 3 mana for a 3/2. It's fine stats, whatever, but it also just puts a card in your hand. It's not even really like drawing a card. Like it's actual like selection depending on how late in the game you are. It might screw up your Descend count, right? Like you don't want to only have 4 things in your yard and then like you use this to get something back and all your other stuff with Descend 4 gets turned off because of that. Like, that would suck, but for the most part, I think it's a fantastic card. And unlike a card like Eternal Witness, this can go in a bunch of, like, these can go in 3-color decks, you know? So, even in Limited, so I think it's fine. Colossadactyl, just a big guy. 4-mana, 4/5 reach trample. So much better than the spider I was just talking about, right? You know, just in terms of stats. And it tramples over. Like, awesome guy. Just obviously cool guy. Thrashing Brontodon, I believe the last green uncommon. There were a couple ones I wanted to talk about, like Twist and Turns might be okay in your ramp deck. But like if you get the 2-mana new ramp and growth thing, or if you get Spelunking and you're playing a bunch of lands, and you just have, you know, Kaslim's Stone Tree, if you're able to ramp with that. If you get a bunch of land ramp, I think Twists and Turns might be okay. But Thrashing Brontodon, just a nice body for the mana cost, and blows up, you know, Thousand Moon Smithy and like a bunch of stuff that would flip over into a land, right? But If they try to do that, you can just like blow it up with Thrashy B. It's just really, really decent in this environment. So it's basically all of those, but there's a few more I want to cover, 3 in specific. Runaway Boulder, again, in your ramp deck. I don't know that you want to play this outside of ramp, but it does cycle away. So it helps your descend count. That helps. It lets you descend. Those are different things. It's so confusing. But there's a bunch of cards that say if you descended this turn, and this helps you do that as well too. So that's kind of neat. But in your ramp deck as well, it's just a removal spell, and like green might have trouble sometimes getting good removal spells. So this helps with that. Scampering Surveyor is a ramp dude on a 3/2. It's just good. It goes and gets caves too. It's a good card. And then finally, kind of a meaty pick, right? This one's juicy. Promising Vein. This will help not only fix. I know it's a worse like Evolving Wilds, but this will help not only fix your mana, but again descend counts. And the neat thing about this one that I think might surprise some people, if you want like some extra like tech here, if you want me to cook slightly just for you, this can actually help you trigger descend at instant speed. And maybe your opponent doesn't see that you can do that. You know what I mean? Like if you have descend 3 right now, and then opponent makes blocks in combat or something like that, or you make blocks in combat, sack Promising Vein, I'm hitting descend 4, all my guys do something now. It could be a thing that you can do. So I kind of like that about it. It also makes sure that you can descend with cards like Zoyawa. Chatter was just talking about Zoyawa before we got on here. Just cards that want you to descend every turn. This helps you do that too. So this does kind of a lot of things. It helps out the cave deck too. It's obvious. That's the thing it obviously does. So gotta keep your eye out for this. This does things, but that is kind of my cards I'm looking out for in every draft that I do in this set. As far as commons and uncommons, there's obviously like bombs in the rare and mythic slot, but these are the cards you're going to come across the most often. And in each color, these are the cards I think are the best, besides, again, the removal, of course, in all of these colors. So that is basically it for the YouTube portion of this bit. We're about to draft up some cards and see if I can put my Munsky where my mouse is. So that didn't even make any sense. My Munsky where my mouse is. My Munsky, what's wrong with my brain? Anyway, that's basically it for the YouTube stuff. So if you're watching on YouTube right now, do the YouTube things like subscribe to the sandwich. Joke never gets old, to me at least. And check out Twitch. You could be here right now having fun with the guys and the ladies and all that. It could be a good time, but instead you're watching on YouTube, which is fine too. I'm happy with that either way. But aside from that, check out the Patreon. We still got a poll going on for the next couple of days. Looks like Aristocrats might win. You can make something else win. If you want dinosaurs to be the first deck tech of the season, go over to Patreon right now. Link in the description. Aside from that, I'm Dunsky for this one ski, and that's all ski Kowalski. That's it, Ski Lewitsky. Just all the stuff I say. I'll catch you cats later. I'm Dev from the place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.